Alright, here's the thing. I know you clicked on this video because I put the Genestealers front and center, and I promise I'm not off my meds, I'm not clickbaiting you. I 100% genuinely believe that I have found Genestealer Cultists shown to our faces in a trailer for this game. And it all has to do with the new Clandestium Gloriana map and the Secrets of the Machine God update. So, put on a belt, make sure it's secure, or put on some khakis instead because you're not going to want to get your jeans stolen. We're getting into the secret that Inner Zone Void sector of Mega 12 is hiding and what it might mean for the future of Darktide. Obey my cat! Hit the subscribe button. To get a clear idea of what happened in this lost foundryplex and what it has to do with Genestealers, we need to understand the physical location's role in Tertium. So let's start with the meta information of what we know about Clandestium Gloriana that we've gotten from Fatshark themselves. Gloriana's proper designation is actually 8-Liam Foundryplex Omega 5, nice and succinct. And if you're wondering if 8-Liam means anything, in this case it seems actually not really. I searched and searched everything 40k that could be relevant I could think of and turned up nothing. I couldn't even find a real life element or anything that the term 8-Liam is connected to. But if you look at it through a lens of being High Gothic, and High Gothic being a made up cannibalization of Latin for 40k, ate is the Latin suffix meaning to have the characteristics of, and ium is another suffix that can actually mean a few different things, but one of the contexts in which it is used specifically deals with metallic elements. So 8-Liam, if you trace it down to possible Latin origins, might roughly translate to stuff that resembles metal, aka Moebian steel production facility Omega 5. Alright, so now that we can be reasonably sure there's no Easter eggs hiding in the Foundryplex's proper name, let's move on to what is relevant: its location. Clandestium Gloriana's mission takes place in what is designated on the mission selection board as Inter-Zone Void Sector Omega 12. This specific sector has been described by Fatshark in their dev blog about the development of this map as deep within the bowels of the hive. So this is a sector that exists between zones of hive tertium and is pretty deep down in the structure of the hive itself, but almost certainly somewhere above the level at which the torrent is situated. It may be a zone that separates the underhive of the torrent levels from the lower levels, where life is generally still not great, but definitely not as bad as living in the crime-ridden cisterns of the underbelly. In fact, in most hive cities, the lower levels are where the working class people who keep power and manufacturing running actively live. And when you reach the inner zone void and first load into the mission, you can tell that a lot of people seemed to have been living here. A lot of people. What's to say these aren't offices or buildings for other purposes? Yeah, just a hunch. But everything is deathly quiet. The only signs of life that there were people here, aside from laundry left to dry, is that we get a peek at some bedding through an open door, and there's graffiti on the walls specifically only in this intro area. And this is unlike graffiti we've seen in any other place throughout Darktide, because this was left behind by Imperial loyalists that were either soldiers or possibly even common citizens who were going through a period of strife. This is reinforced by the fact that this area is actually considered condemned and is also known as Hope's End. This is where we can tell that something happened down here that is completely unrelated to the Nurgle forces we're fighting now, because it is impossible for these people to have been living through the current crisis with the Moebian traders and the Cult of Admonition. How can I be so sure? Because by Fatshark's own information they've provided us in the dev blog about the development of this level, this sector has been effectively lost for thousands and thousands of years. That's why you don't see a single sign of cult or trader activity anywhere in the environment of the level, except for the standard symbols that are put up wherever resurrection points are located where killed players will respawn, which I argue is actually more of a vital mechanic marker than an environmental piece. So the lack of active Nurgle corruption or the normal messages we see left behind by heretics makes total sense, because the heretics only seem to be here in response to our presence, and it's a mystery on how they knew to come here as well. Fun fact, it's also why there's no martyr skull puzzle on this level. The martyr skulls are hidden away in secret shrines seemingly set up by the people of Tertium, or possibly Imperial Guard, to memorialize the lost loyalists of the Moebian Six who died fighting Wolfer's traitors. Obviously that wouldn't fit in this map because nobody's been living here for likely thousands of years. But back to what happened to all the people here. Based on the messages we see scrawled on the walls, we can presume that they didn't all retire to a tropical island somewhere and have a party. Only the strong survive. He will protect us. A still functional loudspeaker system broadcasting Imperial cult messages about how the Emperor protects, and just before you drop down past the point of no return to begin the level in earnest, you catch this chilling warning on the wall of a balcony facing you. Sepulchrum. Sepulchrum has a direct and clear Latin translation. It means burial place, but the use of the word sepulchrum is actually a little more specific than simply meaning a grave. Were you expecting to get 2 micro-Latin lessons in this video? Because it's about to happen again. The use of the suffix in sepulchrum actually denotes that there is a specific singular subject being addressed. This is called the nominative singular, and the use of the suffix can also mean that the subject is either gender neutral or specifically the subject is male. So we're being warned, if Fatshark did their homework on the correct conjugation of this Latin word and actually meant to convey this meaning, that we are in the vicinity of where a single entity, possibly male, has been buried, deep in the bowels of the Hive City. You're going to want to remember that for later. So where exactly is this entity buried? That's an excellent question, and unfortunately at this time we don't have a definitive answer. But I do think that our most likely contender is right in front of our face for most of the Clandestium Gloriana mission. It's entombed in ice. Fatshark explains to us in the dev blog I keep referencing that when it was fully operating, the foundryplex generated a lot of heat, which makes sense when you watch the machine work in the finale while it's refining the raw product into true Moebian steel, because instead of smelting the metal down into a molten liquid, it seems that the process may happen by use of something like superheated plasma. Molten metal is obviously no slouch in the heat department, but plasma is capable of getting up to 20 times hotter, which is why the foundryplex was outfitted with a big-ass cooling system. And the level design devs have said that apparently someone forgot to turn it off, explaining how we traverse through a winter wonderland in the middle of the Hive City. Likely the rain we see at the start and the snow and ice throughout the rest of the level are a result of the condensation byproduct of the coolant system, which subsequently completely froze over as you get closer to the foundry itself. And now that we've discovered the foundry's location and proved through physical demonstration that this machine is indeed capable of creating true Moebian steel, your mission giver isn't shy at all by saying that this can and will change the course of the war. It seems pretty much a given that we will begin the production of real Moebian steel once again, and from what we know about how this area came to freeze over, I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that firing up the facility for consistent production isn't going to be without consequences, since we know the lack of activity from the foundryplex itself is why the coolant system being left on has frozen everything over, and we know that something is buried in this area, and that the Imperial citizens or soldiers were under some kind of threat that prompted them to write "kill, kill, kill," and any drink worth drinking is a drink worth dying for on the walls. Maybe the coolant system being left on and the machine powered down wasn't an accident at all, but a desperate attempt to keep whatever was down here from leaving this interzone void. But what could have been so threatening that freezing hell over and potentially killing or displacing countless people would be the preferable outcome? Remember what we learned earlier. If the Latin conjugation of sepulchrum is correct, we can expect that this is the burial place of a single entity, and possibly a male one, deep in the bowels of the Hive City as intended by Fatshark. And what faction is typically found way down deep in Hive Cities? As conductor of the Genestealer hype train, I am contractually obligated to point out that sepulchrum may be a reference to a Genestealer patriarch. A patriarch is male by necessity, and there's only ever one for each Genestealer cult. But that's an extremely vague connection to make this big of a claim. Fortunately, we get to see Genestealer Cultists in the Secrets of the Machine God narrative trailer. In this narrative trailer, we get treated to a scene that shows us how Swagger came to acquire the information of where Atelium foundryplex Omega 5 is located. And he gets this by setting up a meeting with surviving members of the Water Cartel, promising them some kind of payment in exchange for the Lost Zone's location. Let's take a good long look at these Water Cartel agents. One of them we don't get to see his face at all, but the other two are very front and center. It's most obvious with the man on the left, but above his eyes you can see that his forehead has ridges on either side. These go higher than just wrinkles in the skin from where his goggles are sitting, and when he turns his head, you can tell a lot more clearly in profile that this is a full ridge that comes out. It's like bone or a cartilage structure. You can also see that while there are no ridges in the middle of his forehead, it does abnormally jut away from the rest of his skull in the center. And that isn't a normal character model design that's just there because every human is ugly as sin in this game. No way. Look at the other character models. Maro? Nope. Masozi? Nope. Zola? Nope. Sorry about the time I called you a Genestealer. Rannick? Nope. Still don't trust a motherfucker though. Grendel? Doesn't have a head, too hard to say. Character creator? Can't find this head shape. These cartel character models are unique, and I say these because the guy on the right, you can see on the side of his face that isn't covered by his hair that he has a ridge on the left as well, based on how the lighting is hitting and then diffusing down either side of this part of his forehead. And I can hear the cacophony of keyboards clacking away across the cosmos right now, coming to flood me with a sea of comments that Genestealer Primacy don't have hair. Realistically, none of the Genestealer cultists have hair unless they're an originally infected human. Except that's not true. Yes, Genestealer cultists are most often depicted as being completely bald, including the models and official artwork, but that doesn't mean that that's the only way they can appear. Yes, I would argue even despite of what 8th edition says. Other codexes, lore fluff, and even Black Library books describe 4th generation Genestealers as being able to pass as fully human, including having hair in some cases. In fact, the original intention for Primacy 4th born generation Genestealers was that they would be able to pass as a regular member of their host species. Obviously, the tabletop models are exaggerated because they need to be easily mass-produced and be recognizable from even a passing glance in an IP perspective. But in a grounded context that doesn't rely on uniform mass-produced models, you wouldn't want your premium tier sleeper agents that are supposed to pass as human to all be completely bald with obvious forehead ridges. It makes a lot of sense that Genestealer cultists of generations that look more human would have as much variety in their appearance as actual humans themselves. After all, these are natural born generations, so the passing on of genes is still very much a biological process at play. So what does all of this add up to? That's probably the part I feel the least sure about. I would certainly hope that these characters with clear ridges and abnormal foreheads, combined with the fact that we seem to be warned that something is probably buried under the ice in Clandestium Gloriana, means that sometime in the near future, we will get another mission set on this map that unleashes Genestealers as a new faction. But even if the Water Cartel agents in the narrative trailer are meant to be Genestealer cultists, or only even just suspected as such, that doesn't mean that they'll ever be confirmed. It could be Fatshark just teasing us some more. After all, we've seen a blatant miasmic malignifier in the Hab Draco finale, which is exclusively a Death Guard unit, even though they've said there won't be any Space Marines in Darktide. And there was the incident with the recent Vox intercept that to many of us 40k fans was pretty clearly teasing radium weapons, but Fatshark made it clear that they intended for the dialogue to be regarding the one plasma weapon we already have in the game. Of course, Darktide's next anniversary is coming in the next few months, and I'd argue that with Space Marine 2 coming out in early September, late November would be the prime time for Fatshark to strike and release one hell of an update to bring back previous players into the game and capitalize on potential new players who have been introduced to 40k by way of Space Marine 2 and are looking for more games to learn more about the universe. As always, I'm excited excited to hear what your theories are, so let's continue this conversation in the comments. Or drop by a stream and we'll chat lore. What do you think is buried somewhere in Inner Zone Void Sector Omega 12? Is it related to a new faction, or do you think it's something to do with the Nurgle invasion? Do you agree that the Water Cartel agents we see in the narrative cutscene are obviously Genestealer cultists? Let me know! I'm ready to get further into this. Thanks so much to my supporters for helping make this video possible, Leah S. over on Patreon, and Rue on Top, who is a channel member.